Hi guys, right, okay, so what we've done now is we've applied the Nuln oil, allowed it to dry thoroughly, that's all over the miniature, and then we've also glued GHAZGHKULL onto the base, and what we've used there is, if I've got it to hand, I do, super glue, the gel. This stuff is fantastic. Why? Because it stays in one place, you apply a small amount, and it doesn't seep everywhere, so I'm a big fan of this. There is a time and a place to use liquid super glue if you want coverage. This stuff is great for accuracy work, so well worth investing in. They're pretty cheap. You can get a variety of different brands. Really, really good. So the next stage, what we're going to do is we're going to do some dry brushing. The initial dry brush, however, which will be all over the model, omnidirectional, okay, so what I mean by that is all over in circular motions, is going to be back to lead belcher silver. So that's essentially going to give us all of the recessed wash, but also bring back the colour of silver. And we're going to discuss how we do that next. Right guys, right, okay, so like we mentioned, we're going to start off with lead belcher. That's going to bring back the base colour to GHAZGHKULL. We're then going to move on to a slightly lighter gunmetal by Game Colour, followed by Stormhost Silver, and then finally we're going to finish with a Platter Silver, which is basically almost a sort of, it's almost a white translucent silver. It's very, very, very bright. We're going to use that for highlighting work. And we're going to use a series of dry brush techniques. The first is going to be an all over dry brush. What you need is essentially a medium dry, really, really bog standard brush. All that's going to do is just bring back the base colour to GHAZGHKULL. Once we touch these three paints, we're going to use a set of brushes that have had great reviews. So you can purchase them, but you could use a normal dry brushing technique like we're using with the lead belcher, but we'll come to that in the next video. Right guys, okay, so the lead belcher silver, again, apply with your brush there. Make sure the majority of the paint is washed off, or not washed off, wrong, wiped off using the cloth. And then again, it's just going to be round circular motions all over the miniature, and you're looking to bring back that base level silver colour. So what I'll do is now, I'll continue with this for the full process, and then we'll show you what the end state looks like. Welcome back guys. Okay, so that's the result of the initial dry brush with the lead belcher. You can see that there's a real contrast now between the silver and the dark shades on the miniature, and it's actually sort of blocked in some of that colour, which is exactly what we want on this miniature, which is great. What we're going to do now is we're going to talk about the Artis Opus Series D dry brush set and how to use it, and we're also going to discuss how we're going to use the three silver paints that we selected previously. We're also going to talk a little bit about light source as well, so yeah, stay tuned. Hi guys, the Series D, right, okay, so lovely dry brush set. Set you back about £50 roughly UK, and you might be thinking, geez, that's a lot of money to spend on some brushes, but we'll discuss why they're so good in a second. I say that, it's the first time I've used them, but I've seen them in use at a couple of wargaming events, and I'm pretty sold actually. Dry brushing is a really versatile technique, especially if you want to paint stuff fairly quickly. And remember, you know, most of my tutorials are based on getting battle ready good and getting your miniatures on the table to have a game, okay? I've got a lot of respect and a lot of time for some of those sort of Golden Demon type painters, and you know, it's an aspiration for a lot of people. However, this will get your armies looking really, really good really quickly, so you can get them to your normal gaming club on a Tuesday or whatever. Okay, so we'll discuss what we've got. Essentially, got some dry brushes that are sort of bulbous at the ends, and they wear really well. And you've got a variety of sizes there, from small, from large, all the way through to extra small. What this allows you to do essentially is apply paint in a really, really nice manner. If you touch these feel really tactile. They're a bit like a makeup brush if your wife or girlfriend uses them, or boyfriend for that instance, you know, modern world. They're excellent. Okay, so you can use them in a rotational format, and we'll discuss how we do that. So it comes with as well basically a little sponge where you apply some water to that sponge, only a small amount, so we'll talk through it. What that allows you to do is you apply paint to your texture pad. Now this is what I've got here. Essentially this texture pad's just a really cheap cutting pad, but it's got a lovely little texture. So you apply a little bit of paint to the texture pad, stipple it in, wipe the majority off, apply to the miniature, dip of water occasionally from the sponge. That keeps the paint moving, and then you continue to dry brush. Once you've finished, Artis Opus also give you a little soap where you can kind of put a bit of soap on your brush there, apply it, add a bit of water, move it around the palette, leave it to dry, leave it to soak, brush it off, and then you have your brushes in a wonderful state. So let's get started. Okay guys, first things first, open the little sponge pot and apply some water. Remember, always change your water as often as you possibly can. The reason being, if it's dirty it'll affect the pigment of the paint. So a little bit of water on the end, dipped in, I'd say no more than 2 or 3 drops, and work that around into the sponge, just to moisten the sponge. Doesn't need to be soaking wet. In fact, you want to avoid that if you can. Super. Okay guys, so we've applied a little bit of gunmetal to the texture deck. What we're going to do now is just take a little bit of the paint just onto the tip of the brush, work it in, and kind of stippling motion. Get the excess off your brush. Like so, and that's going to start the dry brush. Again, circular motions onto the miniature. Here's the miniature. Right, this is what we're going to discuss now, a little bit about light direction and choosing a light source. Now, what I mean by choosing a light source is not choosing a lamp, it's choosing the direction of the light onto the miniature. So on this miniature, I'm looking from top down onto the mini. What does that mean? That means that I'm going to look to use my dry brush on the areas of raised metal that are most prominently in the light on the miniature, and it's going to be from that kind of angle. So you can see there that, you know, his claws in there, shoulder pads, top of his gun, exhaust pipes, probably his kneecaps and his feet as well, and the rest we're going to try and keep a little less, or a little more in the dark rather. Same in that side, so, you know, arms, tops of the exhaust pipes, maybe a little bit around his feet. Circular motion, once you've applied the paint to your brush, and we'll come back to see what the first coat with the gunmetal looks like. Okay guys, you can start to see the different contrast in silver now, a lot brighter sort of the top levels of the miniature than the bottom. And what we're going to do now is going to use the same technique with the other 2 colours, which is Stormhoe Silver and Platter Silver, and then that'll give you an indication of actually what the dry brushing will look like at the end in the light source. One thing we are going to do though is, whilst we're doing that, is we're going to downsize the brush size. So at the moment I've used the large with the gunmetal. I'm going to use the medium brush for the Stormhoe Silver, and at the very end on each one of the plates I'm going to use the Platter Silver. Okay, so that'll start to bring the colour out. There you go guys, the dry brushing is complete using the Artis Opus Series D. You can see sort of a real sheen on the sort of top levels of the miniature. If you look at the top there, sort of the exhaust, very high sheen, high sort of silver use of a dry brushing, and then if we go down it sort of darkens off into the sort of the recess areas, including the claw. So obviously we're not just going to keep it completely silver, because that's not what GHAZGHKULL THRAKA looks like. He's a goth, so we're gonna look to apply some black, and the way we're going to do that is using a black sort of contrast method. So that's using some Lathem medium or contrast medium and some black paint. That's going to give us a translucent black layer of paint, and we're going to talk about consistencies in the next video. And then we're going to apply that onto the miniature. Okay, so what should happen, because it's translucent, is that it'll allow some of that reflection through from the from the dry brushing. So those areas of raised light direction should still play a part within the actual contrasting. Right, okay, so this is where we're going to use the black onto GHAZGHKULL. 3 parts contrast medium, technical medium, 1 part black. So I'm using a surface primer from Valeria here, it's fine. And then finally 1 part water. So in order, 3 parts contrast, 1 part water, 1 part black paint. What is contrast? Contrast is paint without pigment. What does that mean? Once you add a pigment, i.e. black paint, to that, it diffuses the paint and makes a translucent effect. You still need to water the paint down on your palette, thus the 1 part water. You should have a nice consistency like that, okay? And not too thick. If you move it around the palette, you'll see that it's quite translucent. And then we're going to apply this to basically anywhere where I want black paint on the armour. We'll show you the finished product. Hi guys, right, okay, so that's the black contrast complete on the miniature. Let's move that around there. Still drying a little bit, but you can see there that I've painted the panels that I want as black, including the weapon, and it's allowed some of the reflection to push through the paint, so it's translucent. So what that offers is areas that you can later highlight a bit more if you want, or you can just leave it as it is. It's not a big issue if you want it sort of super battle ready. What I'll look to do later though is I think I'll probably highlight some of the edges with a bit of grey, maybe a bit of silver, and we'll show how to do that. The rest of the work with the metalwork, things like the claw, the weapon, the backpack as well, we're going to use some glazes, okay, which is essentially the shading, and I'll show you how to do sort of a heat treated steel effect.